So, I highlight certain experiences, certain background, depending on, I did my engineering from India. I did my tech masters in America, but I did my MBA from Cambridge in England. So, it's about kind of finding your 30-second pitch that actually works for the person you're talking to. So it's really about, if it's someone in England or Europe, I do talk about my experience in the UK. If it's the US, I talk about my experience in California. So it's about not just your coaching credentials and coaching, what you're on paper, but really about the human that is there having that dialogue. So if you're able to expose, and this is one beautiful analogy that came through when Drevan and Tracy and we were all in the foundational class, where we were talking about, do we put on masks when we talk? This is all the entire ontological discussions we had. Do we put on masks in front of different people? And one of the beautiful outcomes of that discussion was probably not. We have a sieve and we kind of reveal certain things. Ultimately, we are who we are, but we choose to show certain parts of ourselves. So that's why I think that 30, 60-second pitch is so important, because it's about intentionally thinking, what are you going to reveal to your, still be authentic, still be honest, still be transparent, but what are you intentionally going to reveal to that person that makes them connect with you better? And that, there's a lot about me, but I talk about certain things intentionally.
Welcome, everyone. You are here today, hopefully, for the Business of Coaching / Being a Coach session. And you will see a familiar face for those of you who are watching. Hello, Shyam. Good to see you.
Magda. Good to be back here.
Awesome. So Shyam joined us for last month's session, and he gave us some really great practical advice and experience from him building a business for himself as an independent coach. And he's back here today. So he will mostly run the show. I will ask questions from the audience / ones that we didn't get to from last time. So today's session should be quite practical for those of you who are starting your coaching business, your private coaching practice, but also for those of you who maybe coaching is part of your job, but you have a different side gig, because a lot of what we talk about in this webinar series is quite applicable to any kind of service-oriented small business where you're pitching yourself as the product. So yeah, I think it'll be very, very valuable and useful. And originally we were going to have Shyam for 3 sessions in a row, but we actually think what we're going to do is we'll have today's session with Shyam. So if there's any outstanding questions you already have in your mind or will come up, write them in the chat and I will ask them. And then Shyam will vanish for a couple of months. And then in December, we're going to invite him back, and we're going to have a bit of a recap to understand how people are applying the things they have learned, not just from his sessions, but just throughout this past year. So we can hopefully have some case studies from you, from the audience, telling us how you went and where you're finding challenges. And we can have the December session quite future focused and homework focused, so that everyone can start January off on a bright growth foot. And we can use all the learnings that we have from this webinar series. So that's the plan. But for now, thank you, thank you, Shyam, and welcome everyone to our How Do You Start a Coaching Business session. So, Shyam, where do you want to start?
We ended last time with a bunch of questions for everyone. I'd like to start there.
Cool.
We asked a few questions to the room as homework. Now, it's okay if you didn't do it. That's quite all right. But I will put them up on screen. Maybe we can have a chat about that, Magda. What do you think?
Sounds like a plan.
Super. So I'm going to share my screen in a moment. Should be seeing that now, yes? Excellent. Okay, folks. So when we finished last time, we ended with these questions as a bit of reflection for you. So last time we spoke about how to get kick-started, had a wonderful chat, bunch of questions left over from last time, which I'd love to address, and of course, answer anything else you have. So questions for you were, are you really a coach? Are you a coach? Then this is yourself answering for you, right? And who do you help? How do you help them? What do you charge? This is a point I'd really like to talk about today. There was loads of questions around pricing, so I'd love to focus on that for you. And lastly, how will your clients find you? These were some of the questions we had asked you to think about. And why did I do this? I had asked you these questions because before starting the business, it's really important to get clarity on what it is that you're doing, why is it you're doing, who it is you're doing it for, and how they're going to find you, right? So I have some of my answers, and hopefully it'll spark some answers for you, right? What I'd like to say is, first is, are you a coach? Yes. It has to start there before starting a business. So what you need to do, whatever you need to do to be able to answer a yes. I went through my own journey in getting to answer yes. For me, it was all about, did I feel like I could actually help someone? And when I could sense that there are people in the world who could actually make use of what I had to offer, I felt like I was a coach. So yes, I am a career coach. Who do I help? Mid-career professionals. So as niche, and we'll talk about niching in a moment, as specific as possible, just so that you attract the right audience. How do you help? Find clarity and take action is what I do. And if you can get it down to, I practice it sometimes with some of my career coaching clients. How can you make it a 30-second intro, which includes all of this, right? This is effectively my 30-second intro. What do you charge? We'll talk about that. And then how will your clients find you? And for me, it's about writing on LinkedIn every day. So the base for today is really, Magda, I wanted to set was, how do you get a 30-second intro for yourself? And that's when the kind of business journey begins.
Awesome. Did anybody else do the homework? If you did, please tell us in the chat.
Indeed.
We'd love to see from you. It's interesting, Shyam. I thought about these two, and for me, the answer is yes, I am a coach. And no, I'm not, because I'm not really doing one-on-one things. But it just goes to show you that I think coaching has many different hats, and you don't need to be being in a business to
yeah, I agree. And I wanted to also put that foundational thing out there today, that most of what I talk about today is mostly my retail work, which is basically direct coaching for clients who find me online on LinkedIn and work with me directly. I do corporate work, but I'm largely not talking about that. That's largely about partnerships and associations and being on a panel and so on. But largely what I talk about today is about directly working with clients who will potentially find you through channels you choose, like websites and LinkedIn and so on, wherever you choose to talk about your work. Right?
Yeah, excellent. And speaking of just talking about your work, before I forget, so Coacharia, we started, and by we, I mean, I'm the one who does it. On Thursdays, we do a 20-minute LinkedIn Live every single Thursday. And we prioritize our alumni and our current learners. But if you are a coach, which I assume most of you are, and you want to pitch yourself as a coach and your specific area of expertise, come up with a topic, email me, and if it makes sense, we will happily schedule you for our 20-minute lives on LinkedIn, which gets you exposure to our network, but also gets you a piece of recorded content where someone can ask silly questions that then prompt you to talk about the wonderful things that you do. So email me, magda@coacharia.com, and pitch yourself for the 20-minute pitch. Yeah. Okay. So Shyam.
Yeah.
Should we hop into the questions?
Sure. Yeah. Where do we start? There were so many good ones. Should we start with articulating value? I think that was an interesting
one. I think that's great, because value then leads to price. So there were quite a few questions about the 30-second pitch, essentially, right? Which is, how do I show the value that I bring as a coach? And again, that applies to anybody in a service-oriented kind of business. So let's talk about that. And then whenever you feel that it's natural, jump into the pricing bit. Because that is the literal demonstration of value when you're talking to a client, right?
Indeed. Yeah. I mean, articulating value, first of all, starts with articulating yourself, who you are. So that's the 60-second pitch of, what you do and what you can do for them. In my journey so far, especially talking to complete strangers who literally kind of talk to them on LinkedIn, what I've realized is that I shouldn't be overthinking it, because I cannot possibly articulate what their sense of value is, right? because all this coaching is one-to-one, it's bespoke, it's customized, it's very deep individual basis. So it's very difficult to give a very generic articulation of value. So one thing I've realized is not to underestimate my clients. They'll do their homework. They'll check you out. They'll read what you have written. They'll watch you if you're there on social media. They do a lot of homework. And then when they reach out to me, they've usually done their homework. So if you have a body of work online, please use it and know that people actually do see it before they come to you. So articulation of value, if you have a body of work online that people can see, if it's a blog, if it's a website, if it's LinkedIn, whatever it is, then it just becomes easier and easier over time because people take the time. This is not a simple decision and this is not an easy one either. So this is like, buying a car, I spent so much time, or buying a vehicle or buying a home. It's not dissimilar. People do a lot of research on the person and then reach out to you. So if there is one thing I wanted to share on screen, if I can share my screen again, was that the biggest lesson I have learned is not to underestimate my clients, and they know more than I think. When I do get to talk to them, it's about being direct, transparent, and vulnerable about whatever you bring to the situation, because you can't really anticipate what value they are looking to get. So getting into that dialogue is very important, but putting yourself out there before the dialogue begins is extremely important because that decides where the dialogue begins. And the articulation of value comes from the dialogue. So I rarely go in and actually say, hey, I can do this for you specifically. I can create clarity. I can get you acting towards the better version of your career. But then the actual articulation comes through the dialogue. Yeah.
If I can add something on this one, it kind of also goes, someone in the chat has asked about, tools that you use in the session. At the end of the day, coaching is about listening and about being there for the client, right? So from the very beginning, if we're talking about, being direct, vulnerable, transparent, you're not going to show up to talk to a new client and be like, hey, I'm Magda, and here's my resume, and here's what I've done. No. It's not about me. They've done their research. Of course, it's going to be important. It will come up, potentially your qualifications, etc., depending on who you're talking to. Yep. But at the end of the day, the client is seeking you out because there's something that they need. They have some sort of goal, and it's really about them. So I think if you always go back to, in your brain that this is about the client, I think both pitching yourself and being in the actual conversation becomes much easier, because all of a sudden, all the self-doubts that come to you when you think about you and all the, background noise, when you empty your mind and focus on the client, just everything becomes much easier. And just let them speak. Like they'll tell you what they want and what they're looking for. And it's your job to pick up on what they're talking about. And then essentially, like there's no pitch, right? It pitches itself, so to speak. Indeed.
They'll pick up on what they want, but there is an element of us actually projecting in it in a way that people can understand. So for example, when I say I'm a coach, some people don't get it, some people get it. So there's a principle that I use. It's not technically a coaching principle, but I picked it up a long time ago from Scott Adams, the writer of Dilbert. And he had this beautiful, which I use a lot in my work as well. So I'm very happy. It's not my model. I call it the Scott Adams principle. You can either be very good at one thing, right? You can be the Roger Federers of the world or Tiger Woods of the world. But a lot of us actually, I see coaching as a very generalist skill. There's a lot of skill in here that comes together to make you who you are, right? You're a good listener, a good empathizer, you're able to be there and hold that space. So it's a very wide-ranging set of skills. What we need to do is in that moment, clarify or put into words that people understand what the 2 or 3 things that are really interesting and valuable to them. So most of my work is around education, training, plus coaching. So I kind of play in those 2 spaces. I do some other things as well, but in that conversation, none of them is relevant. So it's about really being very clear what the 2, 3 things that you're bringing onto the table are, and communicating in a way that makes them understand that you are very, very good at it. So Scott Adams says, you can either try to be best at one thing, which will take a lifetime of work, or you can be pick 2 or 3 things that you can be very, very good at, maybe the top quarter at, and then communicate to the world that you're good at a combination of things, which I think coaching is a lot of combinatory, dynamics there, where you say your experience. So for example, I was 20 years in tech. And when I started, I thought most of my clients would be from tech, but they're not. right? And that's a bias I had. So most of my clients are not from tech, which is very, very fascinating. Over time, I realized that. But then when earlier I was talking about it, I was saying, okay, I'll be a career coach for people in tech. But then I realized that actually was not what people were interested in. People were more interested in my diverse experiences. And okay, then, I focus more on international experience, and that makes it more attractive. So it's about finding 2-3 things that really focus your value, and then they'll know what they want.
Yeah, and those 2-3 things should be focused on the audience that you are going after.
Indeed.
Yeah, so they'll be different depending on who you're talking to.
Absolutely. Yeah. That still leaves us the issue with what do you do on a public persona? And there you have to be very careful. You have to pick the ones that you feel, and you can play with them as well. So I usually talk about myself as a coach and trainer, but sometimes I do talk about consulting. Sometimes I do talk about speaking. Sometimes I do corporate acting, so I talk about that as well. Sometimes it depends on the situation. But for the public persona, it's coach plus training for me right now.
Yeah, and you can't, well, I think the point that I'm getting out of this is you can't be everything to everyone. So be some things to the right people, or be the right things to the right people.
Yes.
As long as, it's actually true, and there goes the jackhammer. It's actually true and it's authentic to you, right? So right. I think if I were to talk about myself, I'm a feminist, like no shame about being a feminist. So I think I'll be pretty tough sell to a very traditional chauvinistic type, I don't know, high level CEO. Like I would not be a great fit for that person. And I would never position myself to be a good fit for that person. So just be authentic to yourself. I think, I'll stop and mute because,
No worries. I think this is a great segue. So we're talking about articulation of value. We're talking about what kind of things that you do well, and let the client decide, because they will know what they want and they will engage in that dialogue and figure it out. But you present yourself in a way that is more focused on their need rather than that entire slew of skills that you still have, but it's more important to focus on what they need in the moment. So with that said, I'll kind of segue into the money discussion. There was a wonderful question last time about, what's your relationship with money and how do you price? So I wanted to spend just a little time on the relationship with money bit, because in my conversations and myself, when I've been through this journey, the relationship with money has largely been, initially at least, about what I make and what I earn. But I've realized my relationship with money has become better and better and better once I realized that it's actually a balance about earning money, managing it, and spending it. So my relationship with money, and hence my pricing models, are actually very bespoke, very individual to me, and can be very different for others. And again, one more caveat is all of this is my retail work. So what I work directly with clients on. So once I became more comfortable with my spending patterns and how I am with cash and what I need in the bank, what I need to, that is when the earning bit became more clearer. So with that segue, I want to go into a bit of a flow of information on how I decided to price, and hopefully it'll help you too. For that, I'm just going to go back on my slides and pick the one that I started with last time. So this is the one I showed you all last time. If you were there, you may remember that I said that my pricing strategy was play around with the numbers until I reached a point where I knew somewhere between being free and you are totally nuts is the reaction from the client. Somewhere there you will find it if you keep iterating on it. But Magda and I were having a great conversation about pricing, saying that iteration cannot be every time, right? You will eventually settle on where you want to be, where you need to be. And you'll be able to hold that, and that'll be that kind of anchor for your business. But before you get there, if you are talking about how to price for the very first time, like where do you begin? Here's a bit of a eye chart for you. So this is where I started, and if this resounds with you, fantastic, and happy to answer questions. Now, I think some research as to where the market seems to be at for what you do, for what you are offering, what your niche is, what your space is. So I'm in career coaching, so I did some math, I did some research and figured out where the market seems to be at in the US, in the UK, and India, where I kind of have clients. And then I pushed it to something crazy, and I did test it. And you have to test it. Otherwise, how do you know what you're worth? You have to test it. And that is so hard, because you know that the chances of the client not taking on the the coaching is high, because you are going for something you yourself know is probably pushing the limits. But sometimes it will work, sometimes it won't, because it is a test after all. So my idea, start in that range of where the market seems to be at, and go push a little higher. Start there. Again, you're still testing out the market, right? Next, where do you go? While you're still there, I shared my first client story. So I kind of held those numbers, but first client basically went with, and again, I'm talking about retail clients who reached out to me directly, one-to-one relationships. I said, you're one of my first few clients. You are my first client, actually. And for you, I would love to have you on board. I would love to work with you. And there is a monetary aspect to it, but that's not important. Let's get started. So that's how I began with my first client, if that helps. So discounted into that zone, but I held my numbers in the green area, right? Now, a caveat as well. Don't be afraid to go high in certain places, but pick strategically. What do I mean by that? You will have to choose carefully. If it's a client you really want, if it's a client you really want to work with, and you think there's a good chance that you can actually help them, but that may not be the best client to take a risk on. But do have certain spaces where you are clear about going high and taking that risk, and choose that person strategically. What will happen over time is you will eventually settle into a space by having trials and errors along the way. Yeah. So yes, Magda.
Before you go on though, just want to add something here. So pricing is a funny one, right? Because you don't actually know, and sorry about the banging, you don't actually know if the person is comparing you against others. So you don't know what their anchor point is, right? So if you're afraid to go high, you may miss out, you may not miss out. But there's also situations where, you don't know what the set in which you're being compared against is. So it might actually be that the client wants, let's say, the cheapest, and maybe you are, maybe you aren't, but you don't know. I've actually had situations where I've priced things higher because based on the feedback I was hearing from the prospect, I saw that they put value on the dollars. So if I priced my services lower, they were questioning the quality of the services. So I think the moral is don't be afraid, and it's going to work sometimes and it's going to not work sometimes. But the point is you don't know when it's going to work and you don't know why it's not going to work. So you have to experiment and be brave.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And you have to continue experimenting until you settle, until you find your kind of sweet spot, and everyone's sweet spot is going to be different. So, generally speaking, you should probably be on either side of where the market seems to be at. Again, I'm not being very exact here because I don't know. I'm also playing things around, and this window keeps moving all the time, right? So you got to continually keep experimenting, but you should know, and the narrower you get this range to, the better, and you'll become. I got very comfortable with it. But then exceptions always remain, right? So you find a narrow spot and kind of you should hold it there. But I do take other work. I work with some partners where I do other projects where it's not exactly falling in there. I do it for long-term relationships. I do it for branding, whatever the relationship asks. And also I go crazy sometimes just to continually test the waters, because I don't want this zone to become the comfort zone. It is scientific. It is reached because of having worked things through, but the world's changing too fast. So throw in an experiment here and there to kind of keep it a little interesting. So I'm really terrible at testimonials. So I'm doing a drive this month, actually starting yesterday, to get my clients to actually give me some testimonials and put them on my website. Referrals though happen in the background. I do have a slide actually. I picked out one of my recent referrals to show you how it works for me. I'll call it a reference. And as is the want, I've done it by removing the name. And this happened on August 17th. This happened on LinkedIn. Hi, Shyam, how are you doing? Hope all is well. My ex-client has been singing your praises. I think he needs some career magic. Would you be great to catch up and find out what you're offering? It's literally, that's where it's ended up once the value is out there and people do talk. And I love the fact that clients do actually spread the love with their friends, colleagues, and then references do come. So I don't know, did that answer the question, Magda? Or is there?
I don't know if it did. So the person asked about the, when to ask for them. So I know that they come, and that's great. We'll just come out and do them.
Sure.
I mean, I'll offer my opinion about asking for referrals. I think you should ask, because it's not something that everyone's always thinking about, right? Like if they are, if you think about coaching, again, it's about the client, not about the coach. And the client will definitely connect that when they're having a shift or when they're achieving their goal. They will connect it to the coaching as having helped them, but they're not going to go, oh my gosh, I'm going to email everybody right now and be like, Shyam is the best, refer. No. That's just not how people think. So I do think it's important that you ask for referrals, but I don't think you should be pushing it like after the first session. It's when you are seeing clearly that the client is getting the benefit. And by clearly, I mean not what you imagine it to be, but based on the agreement you have with the client and what the client specified is how they will see success. That's when I think it's appropriate to do it, and not just be like, hey, give me all your friends' emails, but just using authentic language that sounds true to you.
Yes,
that's advice I would give. What do you think, Shyam?
Yeah, I agree. And George has said it right. Referrals make up more than 90% of George's business. And if they're good, if you're good, they will come for sure. And especially if your niche is clear and if you have clients you have really helped, then they will spread the word for sure. It's very interesting that, at least in my space, the career coaching space, a lot of clients are not really open to discussing it until the journey is concluded, because they're still going through, maybe a tough challenge and so on. So once it's concluded and they're in a good place, they're very willing to share and talk about it. So for sure. Excellent.
Should we go to some other questions we had?
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to pull something up as well, because we spoke about, we spoke about clients, we spoke about pricing. And last time there was a really lovely question about how to find your first client, right? We spoke about pricing for the first client, but how do you get yours? And I have to tell you that I have massive butterflies until I signed my first contract with my first direct client. It was beautiful because it is validation that what I was offering was actually useful, was worth money. People were willing to pay for it. Well, one person was willing to pay for it. And I wanted to share how, the things that worked for me. So first one was my first client was through a referral, was a friend's friend who got to know through my friend that I was starting a coaching business. And my friend said, hey, he's done this and this and this, and he's starting off, seems like a good person. And then the first client I actually got was, friend is saying they know you, so hey, let's try this. So it was definitely a massive leap of faith. So it is through connections. So know your connections when you're getting started. Who are the people who will champion and support you basically through your journey, for sure. I told all my friends, all my ex-colleagues, because I went freelance. So I messaged hundreds of people telling them this is what I'm starting. I had a bit of a brochure, no website, no nothing. And I sent it to them and said, hey, if you know somebody who might need this service, please, send this to them. And that it was all on WhatsApp and stuff like that. So simple, clean. First, be honest. I was honest. You're my first client. I did say that. There was no frills about it. But then focus on positives, focus on what you bring rather than what you don't have. You do not have a client roster, you do not have testimonials, and you do not have references. Well, I didn't, right? So so focus on the positives. Partners, and I can see George talking about other coaches as well. Absolutely right. Other coaches, other mentors, people who had done it before, people who could give me some pointers. And if I was associated with a certain, I got accredited on certain psychometric assessment. So that kind of, by association, added some credibility. Again, no client yet, but definitely adds to credibility. And the whole generalist expert thing. So at some point in time, I had to communicate that I could actually do something for that client, right? It's not, I'm a coach, right? It has to, and that took a lot of time. And that I went through my own cycle of experiments with that. My first client was about clarity. My first client was just about, I'm not really sure what I'm doing with my career. It's been 20 years. I don't know where I'm headed. So that was the kind of expert thing I brought in. And to be honest, for the first client, my experience certainly was my own experience, my own. So it was probably a little bit kind of heading little more towards mentoring at that point. But I was definitely eager to get started, so I wasn't too particular about the definitions. I did a bit of mentoring, did a bit of coaching, and I always try to maintain that space of coach, mentor, support, whatever needed for my direct clients. So that's how it began for me. I'd love to hear thoughts in the chat or any questions. Yes, Becca, honesty and authenticity, definitely. Yeah, George talks about interviewing other coaches to get an idea of pricing. Absolutely. I did a little bit of that, but the range was so wide. I really, really struggled. There was a massive range for the retail part. By retail, I mean direct coaching. I really struggled to find it by just asking people. Yeah.
Look, at the end of the day, you have to start somewhere and you have to put yourself out there. And it's scary, and it's going to feel very strange to say, this is what my hour is worth. But if you can't get over that, then you're not going to have much success, I think, long term, because you have to put yourself out there if you're building a business for yourself, whether it's coaching or something else. It's just part of the game. The good part is that, things evolve. So as you kind of move your little box of max and min around and you end up in a particular area, just be okay that it's going to move. And I think as long as you're okay with the expectation that this is not where you're going to end, it's only when you're starting, then it's cool to overprice and underprice yourself a little bit until you get it right.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a question on psychometric certifications, Magda. Did you have any thoughts on that before I give mine?
And no, if you could maybe talk about psychometric certifications and just credentials in general,
Sure.
And maybe talk about, because I know you work internationally, if there's any cultural nuances between different countries.
Okay. Okay, wonderful. Yes. The psychometrics, I mean, I am an advanced Hogan interpreter. So I use Hogan when I was in HR and I was in corporate. So I run my own business now, but before then I have used Hogan before. So there's an element of, who you are is sum total of what you've done in the past. So it's not like starting afresh. So I use Hogan a lot for exec work. I use basic social styles assessments and, Big Five, Ocean, and also the DISC profile assessments for, depends on the requirement. But largely speaking, for people who directly talk to me, the assessments are little icing on the cake. Mostly it's about helping people with real kind of practical stuff. The assessments are very, very useful for the corporate work for sure. Internationally, coaching is is a job that transcends so much countries, regions, languages, and work and businesses. I find the challenges, at least in my work and career coaching, are so similar. I am feeling stuck. I don't know where to go. I'm not growing. I don't know if I need to work in this particular space or change my sector. I'm coming back to work. I'm a woman coming back to work. How do I, immerse myself into work again and integrate better? The challenges are not that different. And in terms of assessments, also psychometrics are very, most assessments are pretty much agnostic to region. They'll have a little bit of differences, but largely, for example, Hogan is pretty well established across all regions.
So I'll add a nuance to that. So when I was asking about the international things, I was asking from perspective of pitching yourself and what makes you marketable. So in my experience, for example, when I'm talking to clients in India, I'm talking about corporates, right? But they're corporates who are looking for individual coaches. So I think it applies. They are very focused on the different things. Like a lot of times they will come with specific expectations of which assessments they want certifications in, etc., or even which kind of past roles they want the coach to have held. I find that less on individual clients, and even on corporate clients in the US, I feel like they're less strict than ones in Asia.
Yeah, I agree. And pitching myself to regional, right? Okay, so here's where the Scott Adams principle comes in. So I'm based in Bangalore right now, but I spent 7-8 years in California, and I spent nearly 10 years in England. So, I highlight certain experiences, certain background, depending on, I did my engineering from India. I did my tech masters in America, but I did my MBA from Cambridge in England. So, it's about kind of finding your 30-second pitch that actually works for the person you're talking to. So it's really about, if it's someone in England or Europe, I do talk about my experience in the UK. If it's the US, I talk about my experience in California. So it's about not just your coaching credentials and coaching, what you're on paper, but really about the human that is there having that dialogue. So if you're able to expose, and this is one beautiful analogy that came through when Drevan and Tracy and we were all in the foundational class, where we were talking about, do we put on masks when we talk? This is all the entire ontological discussions we had. Do we put on masks in front of different people? And one of the beautiful outcomes of that discussion was probably not. We have a sieve and we kind of reveal certain things. Ultimately, we are who we are, but we choose to show certain parts of ourselves. So that's why I think that 30, 60-second pitch is so important, because it's about intentionally thinking, what are you going to reveal to your, still be authentic, still be honest, still be transparent, but what are you intentionally going to reveal to that person that makes them connect with you better? And that, there's a lot about me, but I talk about certain things intentionally. Does that answer better?
I think so.
Yeah.
And kind of going on with the whole sieve approach. So someone else was asking if it's okay to offer advice and mentoring in a coaching session. So, well, hold on. There's two different things.
I know. Yeah.
Okay. Coaching
you
is
go
coaching.
First.
Yeah, I'm going to go first because I think it's important. So coaching and mentoring are not the same thing, right? So if someone's paying you to coach, you should be coaching, not mentoring. So that's one side of the question. The second one is it okay to do it? Of course it is, but this is the agreement that you would have with your client. So if your client is hiring you, let's say that she is a CEO and she knows that you used to be a CEO in an SMB, and the reason that she hired you specifically is because she wants to also get the benefit of your experience and perhaps get some advice. That's great, but that would have been established transparently before you started any coaching. And it would have been clear that while she's hiring you as a coach and that's your primary role, the expectation is there that when the client wants advice, you've agreed with the client that you will provide the advice. If it's pure coaching, there's no advice. So very, very clear. Anything else to add to that, Shyam?
I completely agree. And if I did not come across as being as clear as that, apologies. What I meant was that sometimes what happens is clients need both, and you just need to draw the clear line. And even when I'm mentoring, I do not specifically mentor in the sense of I'll tell you what to do. I'm more about saying, yes, you're asking me a great question because you're saying, hey, Shyam, you've been in that space. What did you do? Now, I'm very happy to share my story, but I'm not advising you do the same thing. That's your call. That's different. And that is clearly demarcated from a proper coaching conversation. So we draw the line and say, coaching over. Let's have another chat. And that chat is largely around me sharing experiences. And you can, like we are having a chat here, and then, you pick what you need and you do what you want from it. If you need coaching on top of that, yes, we'll have the coaching conversation again.
Awesome. Somebody else is asking about branding yourself internally. So a lot of us, even if we're starting our coaching business or coaching is an ongoing career, a lot of people are doing it as a transitional thing, right? Like they're currently in a full-time job and they want to transition to coaching. So what do you do internally to get, the experience or then to maybe shift even to being a coach?
Yeah, I think largely, I'm in the advanced class with Ujjwal right now, and my classmates definitely are doing it internally for their own stakeholders. Some of them are in HR, so they do it as part of their role. Some of them are leaders and they do it for their own reports and extended teams. So it's largely around, I think, not probably, and this is my take on it, not necessarily calling yourself a coach, but exercising the ability to be one and be known for the capabilities and abilities that coaching brings to you and that makes you a better leader, and leading from a coaching capacity. So coaching as a skill rather than coaching as a role is how I see it when you're internal. So you are the head of technology for a company who has a coaching style of leadership. I think that's a really, really good place to be.
I like that. But, because I don't know the context of the question completely. Oh my gosh, of course that happened. Sorry, guys. So it's okay to also tell people that you are a coach, right? So if you have an ability to do it as part of your role, that's great. But I think just like you would be putting yourself out there to get clients, I think it's okay, depending on your company culture, to say that, hey, listen, I would love to practice. Is this okay? But keep kind of some nuances in back of your mind, because in terms of the practicalities of what counts for your coaching hours for ICF and what doesn't. You are not, for example, allowed to count any coaching you do with your subordinates, I want to say. So anyone who's kind of on the same level as you, your peers, totally fine. But people who report to you, you cannot count that as coaching. And I maybe, Shyam, you look maybe confused. Am I wrong? I think I'm right.
I think you're right.
I think I'm right.
It's part of
so anyway.
If it's technically part of your role, right? A really integral part of your role, right? I think that's what the SEO definition is. Yeah. But definitely, if you are getting trained, if you are getting certified, yeah, talk about it. Tell people. you should actually talk about it, because it's all about putting yourself out there for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. So I think we answered the question on assessment certifications. I mean, I thought we answered it, but we could just go back to it quickly. So there are many different kinds of assessments, and there are many different kinds of adjacent skills to coaching. There's no such thing as a requirement to be certified in any of them. So what you need to do once you figure out, what kind of coach you want to be, and you understand your client, based on that, you'll be able to identify if there are additional assessments that are necessary or at least helpful. But I think it's rare that for an individual to come to you and be like, okay, well, I'm not going to work with you until you have A, B, C, and D. All the assessments usually play, if you're working with an individual, yes, they are helpful, but they're really, I think, necessary when you're working on like a systemic type or a team type approach, where or with leadership, where the company is sponsoring someone to get coached and they want a larger view of the status quo before and after the coaching. So it's definitely super helpful and in some cases required, but I don't think that's a must-have. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I'd agree. Unless it forms the anchor. So for example, sometimes there's psychometrics and then there is coaching around it. So if you're anchoring yourself in that space, great. But no, there's no specific need for it for sure.
Okay. So let's go back to the questions that we had. We've gone through pricing.
I had a thought on branding that just came to me.
Tell me.
Right. So this branding, there was this analogy I was trying to make in my head, right? So certifications, right? I think there's a real kind of thing going on about social proof. Who does my friend go to, right? Who does my colleague go to versus certification? Sometimes they go together, sometimes they don't, right? I was trying to reflect on, which doctor would I like for my kids? Probably the doctor my friend takes his kids to, right? So the social proof is very important for branding as well. So certifications are great. Obviously, you want a doctor with a degree and a degree in that specific space and so on. But that social proof of where do people go to? So it's like it kind of builds from there, I think. So that references, referrals, having a network, having a group of people championing your cause, all of that like really helps in your branding for sure.
Which means that when you have a client, connect to them on LinkedIn. Yeah. Right?
For sure.
So someone's asking about coaching niche. How did you decide your niche?
Yes, great. A lot of introspection, both internal, external. So self-awareness, internal, external. Internal went in and deep dived on what I can do well. And that is one of the questions I ask all my clients very, very early on, saying, what do you do well? It's sometimes a really tough question to answer when you're not in a good place. I was not in a good place when I first asked myself that question. So it took some time, and I realized that what I brought was rich international experience in not just regions, but also different kind of work, operations, HR, marketing, sales, etc., etc. So I decided what I really brought and what my external looking brand was diverse experiences. So I said, okay, career then, great. But then career for whom? And as I had shared earlier, I thought technical kind of techie zone would be where I would really function. And I started there and I started to reach out to people there, but then it changed into wider. So the niche, the micro niche that I'm in is really career. I only focus on career coaching and also on career moves, career changes. And it would be remiss of me to say that I knew exactly what this was going to be. I did know it was career, but the career moves, all that really came over time. Over first client, second client, third client, I realized this was happening. So the niche, definitely decide a micro niche. Do not go broad. I think somebody did ask last time, because what happens is you become a little bit of something for everybody, and you don't attract the right kind of attention. So I would definitely recommend starting with a micro niche, as micro as you can get. Then what really happens is the micro niche then develops into multiple micro niches, right? And you'll probably have 3 or 4 spaces. I'm playing in 3 or 4 spaces right now, for sure. But that doesn't mean I'm playing in a completely broad space. I'm playing in about 2 or 3 or maybe 4 kind of micro niches. But start from somewhere you're comfortable with and then see where it takes you, I'd say.
Yeah, and someone earlier commented that it's possible to be a generalist and be successful.
Yeah.
Of course, everything is possible. It's just, when we're talking about in this context, especially is, what are the most likely paths to success?
Yes.
I'm sure that you're a wonderful person. We're all wonderful people, but that doesn't mean that the world knows that or cares, frankly.
And
right?
Yeah, on the generalist point, I just remembered Dave Epstein's range where he talks about how generalists are really late specializers. Basically, having done a bunch of stuff, then you late specialize. And that's exactly what coaching has been for me, where I did a lot of stuff internationally in various roles and everything. And then I kind of all gelled together into one thing that the world understands. So the late specialization in my 40s has been coaching, which is basically this amalgamation of everything, but then in a way that the world actually gets. And that is so important.
I love that. There's another question around social recognition or the social proof versus international certification. My view is that it's not either or. I think it's kind of both, and it's neither, and it depends.
I mean, can I answer that with my doctor example? Of course, I want social recognition. Of course, I'd rather take my kid to the doctor my neighbor takes her kid to. But definitely I need the doctor to have a degree. But between 2 doctors who have a degree, I'd probably pick the one where my neighbor goes to. So, I don't think it's either or more important. It's got to be both. But then again, it's all about playing, that strength where it needs to be played, right? If there's a client who has researched many credentialed coaches and you're talking to that person, and then maybe the social proof is important. Maybe the referral came through somebody, so they already have social proof and they want to know about your credentials. So it's really about understanding which one needs to be presented.
Yeah, and so the reason I said either or sometimes, because to me, it's there's different cases, right? So for example, if I go to any of the corporates who want individual coaches, what happens is that the corporate will have very predisposed views. So in their case, they're not even going to look at the social proof. They're just going to look at, do you tick box A, B, C, and D? It frustrates me so much sometimes when I'm talking to someone, I'm like, I have the perfect coach for you. They're like, oh, but does she have an MCC? And I'm like, no, she doesn't, but she'd be perfect. I can't suggest her because the client doesn't want it.
Exactly.
But that happens.
Yes.
On the flip side, depending, again, it's where the niche I think is so important versus being a generalist. Like, would you go to an MCC coach who isn't fit and doesn't really care about healthy lifestyle if you're looking for a wellness coach? No, you wouldn't. You would go to someone who maybe doesn't have a credential yet, but who clearly knows what they're doing and understands the balance of diet, exercise, mental stability, whatever. At which point social proof is going to be the #1 thing you're going to look at. And you're actually going to look at social media in that case as well, right? Because you're going to look at, does this person practice what they preach? So it really, I think it does depend based on your specialty, your niche, and what's important to your client. Again, like I'll go back to, it's about the client. Like you really need to understand what the potential client wants.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, like if you're here and the client is here, like if you're going to mark, you're never going to meet. Like you need to adjust a little bit so that you crash into each other at some point, right?
Yes. And sometimes it is a crash. And from that emerges the beauty. Yeah.
Yeah. And someone asked, isn't it about the result outcome? You wish actually, but honestly, like if you're not going to get hired, there's no result or outcome to look at, right? So
sometimes it's really hard. Yeah, because you don't know enough about the situation to say what outcome is actually indeed possible. Yeah. And you need to get into that conversation. Sometimes it's very difficult to know what outcome is actually possible until you sometimes even after I've begun, only then the outcome has become even apparent. So sometimes it does come from the client directly. I have had no say in the matter of what I'm. So then it becomes a question of what are you actually putting, what value and what outcome are you promising, not promising, are you, are you there to deliver? And sometimes it's not clear. So it has to be at a high level, and sometimes you just cross that bridge and trust the process, not the outcome. So I'm a big process guy.
I want to add something because it just occurred to me that I may have sounded like I'm saying credentials aren't important. I think what's important actually is the coaching education.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm saying that because I'm CEO of a coaching training company. No, I'm not. I'm saying that because there's so many people who call themselves a coach. And many people don't know what coaching is. And they just decided one day to wake up, and they might have all the social proof in the world and not a credential. So back to your doctor analogy. So maybe, if credential isn't something that you end up doing or can do right away, I think that training is really important, because
yes,
it is going to show in the way that you put yourself out there. It's going to show how you show up for your clients, and it will show up in the results. Coaching skills really, to me, it was mind-blowing when I understood what actually goes into being a coach. And it's so simple once you think about it, but someone has to tell you to think about it. And just waking up in the morning and saying, I'm a coach, does not mean you have coaching skills.
Yes. Yeah, totally true. And in all self-disclosure, I have completed the foundational course, and I do talk about it with clients when they ask. And I'm in the advanced batch with Ujjwal and my wonderful classmates. I do not have credentials yet. ICF credentials. I do not. So I will be, I am aiming to get them by the end of the year.
Awesome. But you have the skills clearly, and you're practicing them. So
exactly.
There you go. So someone is asking about, we have a few minutes left only.
Oh.
Someone's asking about getting your second client. And I kind of want to throw in one of the questions we didn't answer yet about being a younger, less experienced coach. If you could answer both of those. So the kind of long story short is that, you have your background in tech and HR and whatever else. So you have some background that you built upon, or not built upon, but you have some background. A lot of people don't have that yet, or perhaps they weren't in a leadership position, right? So they don't have as much stuff to leverage into the coaching career. So what advice can you give to them to still be able to do the stuff that you do so well?
Right. And I think what my experience has taught is I don't know. I have to try it. And what happens is I think we attract people like us. And I think it is very important to be liked as a coach. Credentials, experience, skill. I think when you're putting yourself out there, people need to feel like they want to pick up the phone and talk to you, right? And what happens is I think people, if people find commonalities with you, where you've been, your experiences, and of course, it's more and more you put out there, more and more there is for people to find commonality with. I think if you're younger, then you'll probably, attract the energy from your peers or someone who's been in very similar spaces. There are, freelance coaches, graphic designer coaches, digital marketing coaches who are probably in their mid-20s. They're doing very well. I see them on LinkedIn. There's loads of them. So it's about finding your niche where you attract the right energy to yourself, I think. It's, I think the specific question, Magda, if I remember right, was how should a younger coach get a corporate client? I think if I remember correctly, that was a very interesting one. I don't know. I don't know. That's such an interesting question. I've not been in that place myself. I'll have to reflect on that. Maybe I'll bring the answer back in December. I hope it's not too late.
Yeah, but you know what? Maybe I'll throw it out there. I think sometimes, especially when you're younger, right? When you're younger, you think you can accomplish everything, and you can, but you also aren't as practical, I think. So maybe if you're, 25, is corporate work the right answer for you? Is that where you can show up? Maybe it is. But, I would encourage you to think more broadly in terms of what are those micro niches. Don't just go, I have to be a corporate coach or a life coach, because that's the two big ones that I hear about in the world. There's such a big spectrum, and there's people to fill that spectrum.
Yes.
Where are you?
One of the things we talk about, at least to myself, I tell myself, is pick and stick. So pick something, give it a chance, and give it 3 months, give it 4 months, give it 6 months, and see if it works, and then move on. I certainly made the mistake of going through too many too quickly. because it's very difficult to find a niche in like a month. It doesn't work. And that goes to Rajiv's question of how you're maintaining a sales funnel, right? Because you can't do an experiment for a month. You got to give it that 3 months. You may be running 2 parallel experiments in 2 different places, and that's okay. But you got to give it that time. And once I gave it that time, what happened is my funnel is purely LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn every day. Feel free to connect and talk. And I talk there every day. Welcome to have a chat. And yeah, I mean, so do you, Magda. I mean, I've done my first LinkedIn live. So.
I know. Awesome.
Thank you.
I've, sticking to stuff is hard. I'm very, very bad at it. So I know that it's hard.
It is hard.
Yeah. None of what we're talking about is, easy, but we're all here because we chose the path that we have chosen, because coaching is like a calling. And I think it's wonderful, but it just doesn't happen. If you build it, they will come. Literally never works. And coaching is not quoted from that. Yes. So, yeah.
Can I add to that with one of my favorite quotes I've heard from, I love Naval Ravikant. He talks a lot on online, and he talks about his own physical trainer. I forgot his name. I'm so sorry. But he says, his physical trainer says, easy choices, hard life. Hard choices, easy life. So I think we have all taken some hard choices, but eventually if you stick with them, good things ahead.
I love that. What a great place to end. And actually, I was going to ask you for some homework, but maybe the homework that we can give to people is, what are some hard choices that you can make for yourself that will potentially give you the biggest payoff in your coaching career? And maybe make those hard choices, and we can regroup in a couple months and see how it went. What do you think?
I'll come back with mine for sure.
Awesome. Yeah. I have a few hard ones already I can think of. So so everyone, thank you so much for today. Shyam, you're awesome.
Thank you, everyone.
Know that. But yeah, coaches who are listening or later, this is your homework. Like, we're going to hold you to this. Before the December session, I'm going to email all of you, and I'm going to ask you to reply with what hard choice you made before the next webinar, and maybe invite a few of you to come talk about it.